Welcome to Nice Work. I'm Alex Chambers.
And I'm Tyler Lake.
Tyler, I've been thinking back to 1999 lately. I was in college in Ann Arbor, and I remember seeing these flyers offering rides out to Seattle. People were heading out there to protest the meeting of the WTO. That's the World Trade Organization.
Alex, you saw the flyers. Did you end up going?
No, I thought I had too much classwork. I've regretted it ever since. It ended up being a historic protest.
Well, don't worry. Kate interviewed the makers of a new documentary about it called WTO 99, and it'll bring you right back.
That is a relief. And since it's Valentine's weekend, I thought we should raise some questions about love.
Oh, nice. And summer's not around the corner, but we'll talk summer camps for creative kids.
And I saw Constellation's latest show, so why don't I review it at the end of our show?
That sounds great. That's all in Nice Work after this.
This is Nice Work. I'm Kate Young. People from all walks of life marching in the street with giant handcrafted puppets, large banner drops with political messages, protesters blocking traffic, police in riot gear using tear gas on demonstrators, mass arrests. These scenes might seem familiar these days, but what I'm describing is the 1999 protest against a meeting of the World Trade Organization in Seattle, Washington. Our guests today, Ian Bell and Alex Megaro, are the makers of a documentary film, WTO 99. It's about the events surrounding the meeting of this newly formed international body. The filmmakers came to Bloomington in December of 2025 for a screening of the film at the IU Cinema. We talk about how they crafted this purely archival film, what happened that week in Seattle, and how this massive protest in 1999 was in some ways the testing ground for new tactics used by both activists and law enforcement that have become standard practice ever since.
I'm Alex Megaro. I am the producer and co-editor on WTO 99.
And I'm Ian Bell, the director and co-editor.
Welcome to Nice Work, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming in to talk with me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
For those listeners who were maybe too young or who were not paying attention at the time, could you just kind of set the scene for us? What was the WTO and what were the WTO protests in Seattle in 1999?
Yeah, so in the 90s, there was a movement towards expanded free trade, starting with NAFTA and then expanding into our membership in the World Trade Organization, which was a kind of a governing body of trade that would help decide on trade disputes between nations, and that the participating nations could come together to decide international trade policy and different agreements. And one of the things that people found about the World Trade Organization, one of the things they found concerning was that if there was a law that was decided upon locally that would maybe protect that community against unfair trade or unfair labor practices or child labor or environmental practices they didn't condone, the World Trade Organization could strike down that law. And this brought labor, environmental groups, human rights groups all together for a week of protests and an attempt to shut down the World Trade Organization as they attempted to meet in Seattle in 1999.
So the World Trade Organization would basically, their laws would supersede individual countries' laws.
Yeah, they were like a judiciary for trade.
Okay. And so that's what was kind of unusual and what people were kind of rising up against. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so can you talk a little bit about what the organizing looked like? Yeah,
so the result was roughly 40 to 75,000 people arriving in Seattle, flooding the streets, participating in direct action to attempt to shut down the ministerial, which they did in part. They slowed it down. The first day was canceled and other meetings were delayed. And from our understanding, it took months, if not the year, to bring these people together. There was a lot of work to bring these coalitions together, and a lot of training and skills development so that people could protest peacefully and have direct action peacefully and know and be prepared for the way that the city and the police might respond. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of work that went into preparing for the week.
Yeah. Can you talk about your approach to this documentary, to making this documentary?
It's a fully archival documentary. It's 100% archival. We'd shot nothing for it. It's all pre-existing footage. There's also no interviews or voiceover used in the film. So it is strictly pre-existing footage stitched together. And our approach was to do this in do a rigid chronology of these 4 days. So we had roughly, by the end, 1,000 hours of footage, and we decided to structure it day by day, hour by hour, in some cases minute by minute, to give you as close as we can to a real-time reconstruction of this event in what comes out to an hour 40. And we really were trying to adhere to be as objective and as truthful as we could, while still, constructing a film, but making this a historical artifact first. And all the editing and construction of this footage, editing choices, all are done in service of keeping that artifact as truthful as possible.
Wow, that sounds very challenging on so many levels, both on just the amount of footage that you're having to work through, but also just on making those choices, because you are human beings with views. And, I just think that it must have been difficult to decide how to balance the different views that were expressed in the different kinds of footage that you had. Because let's talk about what kinds of footage you had. Some of it was on the ground, shot by people who were demonstrating, right? And then some of it was from media organizations, from newscasts and different, media. And I'm trying to think who else would have been, what other kinds of footage you would have had.
We had footage from the Independent Media Center, which was a collection of independent reporters, producers, videographers that came together to report directly on events like the WTO, stories that they thought the public might not get otherwise. And that constituted the first roughly 400 hours of footage we had access to. Beyond that, there are local just folks, amateurs, people that took their camcorders down, other professionals locally that had, videographers or news camera folks that brought their own cameras down to shoot the events. And then we have local news and their coverage around the clock. And we have police video that they were shooting for their own records. And then international, national news outlets. We had access to some of the Department of Transportation, CCTV. I can't remember if any of them ended up in the film. We had the police, their radio broadcast to each other. We had the recordings of them talking to each other.
You had access to that.
Yeah, which is especially when you have local news, the police tapes, the police radio, and a few other sources that had timing baked into it. That's where building it out chronologically became possible, because we knew when things were happening. And there was so much footage from other sources that we could begin syncing it up and piling it because of visual cues. On any given moment, we would have, one or two, if not 12 or 13 angles on a scene. So we could really understand it from behind the police lines and in front of the police lines. Mm-hmm. We could hear the crowd responding in real time, and then the local news framing it and maybe constructing a different narrative in real time. And so by just is the wrong word, but by constructing it, as Alex was saying, in a way that we look at it as an artifact, and then we look for the moments that seem to lead to the next moment, and we look for the themes that are emerging and try to maintain the themes that seem to be important to the people that are there on whichever side you're looking at. That kind of helps guide what gets cut down.
And just on a pure technical level, we had a very rare chance to edit in a very specific way. As Ian mentioned, we have, sometimes up to 12 angles on a single incident. We can edit this. We can do continuity editing, and a thing that usually is not possible in archival films because there's just not that many angles on a single event. And we've said that we had this rare ability to edit as if this was a fiction film that we went and set up a bunch of cameras to capture a scene, except it's real and we can show varying angles, but keep the edit fluid so it's less confusing for a viewer. And it's a very specific experience, and it allowed us to do multiple things. The film works on multiple levels. It's a factual retelling of these events. It's as truthful as we can make it. And hopefully you can walk away understanding the different sides, understanding the different arguments, understanding why people came to protest, how the response happened to them. So it's a factual film. On another level, it works as an experiential film. And because we have so many first-person views, and you're in the eyes of a mosaic of people on the ground experiencing the reaction to the protests, something that not many people have necessarily experienced, to be in the fray to that degree. It's an experiential film, and it can give an added layer, hopefully, of empathy to people on the ground rather than looking at a distance, seeing them as like specks on the ground from a news chopper. You're actually on the ground experiencing this with them, and hopefully it adds an emotional truth to the reality that then informs the factual informs the emotional, back and forth, and it just gives a viewer a greater understanding of what was going on.
And because of the kind of the robust nature of what we like to think of like the visual data set, we can unpack the mechanics of the protest. For like being from Seattle, there's people that participated and there's people that didn't. And talking to various people as we were making it, and even growing up past the events, people walked away with different experiences depending on if they participated or if they watched it at home. And so we not only can watch all the footage and understand what happened and then what happened next and have a sense for the actual events instead of what the narrative was, but we can compare the footage from the ground with the footage and the narrative creation that's happening in the local news. And we don't have to say anything as filmmakers. We don't have to add narration to give the audience a chance to understand how a narrative was constructed that doesn't reflect what happened on the ground.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. I think that definitely comes through. Yeah, so you can see a version of what was happening, and then you can see a version of how it was depicted in the different ways. I also feel like you watch those narratives changing. Like my perception of it anyway, I mean, I would need to do a little more careful viewing of it, but it seemed that from the media perspective and from the authoritative perspective, like from politicians and from police, it changes. Like it starts out real positive and welcoming and, oh yeah, everybody's got a right to express themselves. And then not so much later on.
Yeah, there's very much the mayor at the time is very welcoming and hopes everyone has a good time and hopes the message get across, and then becomes known for massive limitations against the First Amendment. There's a moment in the film where Mike Dolan, who is one of the main organizers of labor and the larger environmental groups and whatnot, and trying to building a bigger coalition, he talks about this no protest zone that the city had constructed. And he was like, I've never seen it in any community, and I hope to never see it again. But unfortunately, the concept of where we can and cannot speak has continued. And so we now have free speech zones around politically sensitive events like the Democratic National Convention.
Yeah, and you also see how on day one, the protesters are in place, peacefully sitting on the ground, and it's 3 hours into this protest, and everything that the mayor had said about everyone being able to express themselves is thrown away, and the cops are tear gassing these very peaceful protesters, 10 in the morning. And the arc that you see that really fascinated us was the police chief, Norm Stamper. And on day one, there's a press conference where a reporter asks him if he is using rubber bullets against peaceful protesters. And he pushes back and just says, I don't need to tell you what kind of weapons we're using, in a very forceful way, while also being challenged by another reporter saying, I was there and these protesters were seated. They were not charging. They were seated on the ground. So there's already a divide there. But you see him on day three grappling with his choices in a way that I've not seen American police tending to do in public, where there's a press conference on day three, and he explains that in the training of the police to respond to these protests, they were trained with the expectation of violence. And when the protesters were nonviolent, they did not know how to respond, but with the violence they were trained to expect from them. And you see him grappling in real time with his decisions, and it's unlike anything I've seen in American media.
Yeah, before or since?
Yes.
I wanted to go back for a second to what you were talking about with the experiential kind of on the ground and how different that can feel emotionally. There's a moment where when they break out the tear gas and start tossing that into the crowd, and there's audio from a reporter, and then there's a visual of kind of the scene where you can really see the canisters getting kind of lobbed back and forth. But hearing that audio from that reporter on the ground, who's the in-studio anchor is, asking her to talk about what's going on, and she can barely speak because she's coughing from everything, from all of the chemical. Could you talk about that for a minute and what went into that?
Yeah, so there's this moment you're describing in Seattle's 6th and Union where the first major gassing event took place, and we're there for a few minutes as the police attempt to what they consider take back the intersection. And a lot of people are experiencing these chemicals and dispersing as best they can. If they can, some are trying to hold the ground. And we, because we had access to the local news coverage, we also hear a local reporter experiencing the same thing. And as you mentioned, she's really struggling with the chemicals. And she's still trying to describe what she's saying. But to hear her choking on the chemicals and to talk about the tank advancing through the intersection, as we're also hearing the screams from the other cameras that we are showing on screen, it really struck us as such an emotional moment, especially with the news had been they don't seem to get on the ground in that same way before. And even after, if they have negative interactions with the cops, they try to downplay them a bit. But this moment was very visceral because she's clearly being exposed and being affected by the chemicals.
Yeah, and she even says the tear gas is very powerful.
Yeah.
And before that, kind of leading up to that, there was pepper spray and, the kind of blast grenades. Is that what they're called?
Concussion grenades?
Concussion grenades, yeah.
Okay.
And they're also shooting wooden dowels.
Oh.
I can't remember what the bigger guns are called, but...
Yeah, mixed with rubber bullets. They had a whole array of weaponry to respond.
And pepper balls, which are both impact, the pain from impact, but they also, once they hit you, they release pepper gas.
So do you see this moment of the, Battle for Seattle, as it has also been called, as a time where these specific police tactics were put into place? Had all of these things been used before?
No, in fact, the pepper balls Ian just mentioned were an experimental weapon, and this protest is the first documented use of them against American protesters. Kettling as a tactic, this is the first documented use against American protesters. The police showing up with the knee pads, elbow pads, chest protectors, like the borderline Darth Vader uniform that we now see everywhere.
Right,
it's the first time it was documented against American protesters. So this was a testing ground in many, many ways for future response tactics, to the degree that police precincts around the country were studying the response in Seattle, watching video, and using that to make their future tactics more sophisticated. So it was used as a training tool.
Wow. Can you explain what kettling is?
Kettling is where the police form kind of a barricade and try to corral the protesters into a single area where they can't escape. And if they attempt to escape, they are then said to be running towards the cops, being violent, and they can have a violent response can be done against them.
And I'll mention, you mentioned the Battle for Seattle, which is a phrase we actually don't have in the film anywhere. And I've always felt, especially having watched all this footage, that it construes this idea of two opposing military forces.
Okay.
And I think because there's been a narrative of the violent protester, and the violent protester does not exist in the visual record. There are some broken windows. There's a handful of people that did commit property damage, but we did not see a violent protester in the 1,000 hours that we reviewed. Violent against a human body.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just the idea of the Battle of Seattle is two opposing military forces, when it was really a militarized police department against the citizenry. And so it's interesting that we still think about it in those terms.
Yeah, and also that term makes it sound like it's just this event that happened in Seattle as opposed to an organized demonstration about a particular issue, which was WTO.
Right, both a national trade policy and something that had international implications.
Yeah, it kind of erases that. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting that how does it frame the debate as we continue to remember it?
Yeah, and what you were saying about the violence, I feel like that's something that has definitely continued, that if a protester has any destruction of property, it's deemed as violence. Mm-hmm. And so even some of the things that are seen are physically trying to stop vehicles from going through intersections. Protesters trying to put objects in the way, put their own bodies in the way sometimes. There's one moment where a protester kicks a cop car as it's going by. But again, while that is aggression, there is nothing that's happening against a person.
Mm-hmm. And even there's one moment on that very first gassing incident on 6th and Union where a protester charges the police tank.
Yeah.
And this is my interpretation of it. You don't see him swing at anybody. He basically is putting his body on the vehicle.
Yeah, he climbs on
to focus the attention, and he's bludgeoned.
Yeah.
But I don't see him actually engaging violently, except for putting his, he's rushing the police, which is not, he's ill-advised maybe, but.
And there's also, in that same scene, there's a protester who stands and has his arms out and is just standing and facing them. Clearly in a move that feels, it's like a classic nonviolent civil disobedience move. It's like, I am unthreatening and I'm not moving. Mm-hmm. And gets basically pushed to the ground.
And again, he draws the attention. So almost every rubber bullet that happens while he's doing that hits him.
Yeah, he's being pelted the entire time. And what's fascinating about that image, it stems from a shot that we were able to hold on it for a very long time. And you can watch all of this slowly develop where there's the line of seated protesters. He's standing there with his arms out. And you can see very clearly that there is objectively no violence being aimed at the police at that moment. And yet they're still knocking him down. They're pelting him with bullets. And that's right before the gas is launched.
And part of this is, when we were going through the local and national coverage of this to try to add that layer to it, most of the media coverage of it, the narrative was that there is violence in the streets, so the police have to engage. The CBC also covered it, and they seemed to be the only outlet we could find that spoke really clearly about what's happening in the streets. And their coverage was that the police decided that they needed these intersections back, and they were going to do whatever they had to do to make it so that people could attend the meetings, which is what you see in the footage. They cleared it, and then people could attend the meetings.
Yes.
Yeah, CBC Canada was making more balanced narrative, let's say, than sensationalized American media.
Or they were reporting on what they observed.
Yeah, I mean to me that's what comes through very clearly is that the violence from the protester side was blocking the intersections,
which is not violence. Sorry, we don't have to put that in. Well, it's interesting, the definition of the words,
Yeah. So I wanted to also highlight and talk about the kinds of tactics that the organizers were using that also, to me, seemed, not being a historian of, political organizing, seemed to me to also be kind of new. They seemed really well organized. They were doing trainings which actually aren't new. It felt more like a calling back to the civil rights era where it's like, hey, we got to teach ourselves, we've got to teach each other how to do nonviolent civil disobedience because we don't necessarily know how to do this. Everybody doesn't. And I loved the scenes that showed one of those training sessions where people were teaching each other, like, okay, when you do that, that's can be construed as coming at a cop, and that allows the cop to now use their baton. So I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting thing, and also just some of the creative moves that the protesters used. Could you talk about some of those that you saw?
Yeah, to your point about the training, it's fascinating to see the granular organizing. It's something you often don't see because that's often not filmed. In fact, what you see in the movie is almost all of the footage we had of that. It was very, very brief.
I suspected that was the case.
But it does tell a larger story. I mean, as Ian alluded to earlier, this had been planned for a year in advance. In fact, there was a day where it was going to be decided whether the ministerial would take place in Honolulu, San Diego, or Seattle. The moment Seattle was decided upon, some of the main organizers, Mike Dolan, who had been mentioned, included in this, started renting out full hotels in the proximity or in the perimeter of the convention center. So they were planning a year in advance to do this. And the tactics that were deployed were nonviolent, but they were to block the specific intersections that all lead to the convention center. And Seattle, being designed as it is, made shutting down that center a lot easier than many other cities. So just it was a fault of geography in part.
Interesting.
But the organizers and the demonstrators, they knew the intersection they were going to shut down. There was communication between groups. Very few people had the full plan. They just knew what their part was to be. And they all would take an intersection nonviolently, just sit down, shut it down, and prevent any movement from getting past them, getting to the convention center. So it was very practical. I would actually say, I know you're talking about the creativity of some of them, but that is a creative tactic, and
definitely.
It's fully nonviolent.
And to jump on that, like it seemed like a big and very open coalition. So if you wanted to march, there was space for that. If you wanted, there was giant puppets and performance and other pageantry to get people's attention and also to get the message out. It wasn't just direct action, but it was all of it together. There was, people like climbing up buildings and dropping banners down, and like everything, all skill sets seemed to be welcome. And they did. There was a lot of preparation, a lot of skills sharing and development. And one thing that made Seattle uniquely challenging for the ministerial to happen without a hitch is that at the time it was one of the most unionized, it was the most unionized part of the nation. So labor was already there. Labor came from all across the nation and from Canada and all elsewhere. And on top of that, there had been a lot of environmental activism in the years leading up. And so a lot of people had been trained because of different movements and different activities. And so this stuff people were prepared.
So which is fascinating because it was there were so many groups that were involved, and we often marvel watching it now it's a cross-class coalition. You have leftists, you have union organizers, you have students, you have environmentalists, you have just normal people who are out there affiliated with no group, and it brought everyone together against a singular opponent and across the political divide as well in a way that we are conditioned to believe is not feasible in the United States. We're conditioned to believe this cross-class coalition can exist, the cross-political divide coalition can exist, and that collective action can't be powerful and be used as a means for success. Tom Hayden shows up in the film, and he mentions that he had seen an intelligence document in the 60s where the name of the game was perception management, that powers make sure that people do not perceive that protest or collective action can be a means to success. And you see so many versions of that perception management throughout the film, especially from the news media and their various narratives, even to, at the very end, Peter Jennings, and on day 4, when the protests or the ministerial is ending, he does a nightly report and says that something along the lines of the protesters will move on to whatever cause that moves them in this very sarcastic tone. And that as well is part of that perception management, to make the viewer believe whatever their cause is, in giant quotation marks, is just silly and should be laughed at. So there's so many variables on that specific tactic that Tom Hayden was referring to.
And Alex mentioned that it was not just cross-class, but it was also across the political spectrum. One of the few elected officials that we could find in the footage that was consistently in the streets was a local Republican, concerned over sovereignty, concerned over the anti-democratic nature of the WTO, and wasn't just out there worried about his own issues. He was also there like trying to keep the protesters safe, trying to give them tips on how to engage and keep their bodies safe. And so I think it's a really interesting lens for us now, where it's really hard to see a world in which people from different political viewpoints can work together for a single cause.
Do you feel like this kind of, it's hard for me to picture this kind of coalition coming together for this kind of action today around a different cause? I mean, I don't know. I would just like to hear your perceptions of that just in some of the movements that have happened since then.
What's been interesting showing this film around the country and even in Europe is how it seems to, just the conversations we've had, they've seemed really inspiring, especially people that weren't aware of the events, younger people. The fact that this could be pulled off then, it doesn't feel out of reach for a lot of the younger people now. And that like this, with a lot of hard work and some really committed leadership, that large coalitions can be constructed. That's been my takeaway watching it with audiences all over the place.
They often, especially younger viewers, sometimes younger organizers and activists, they'll tell us, I didn't think this was possible in the United States. They've been trained to believe it's not possible. And they watch something that took place 25 years ago, which is not that long ago, and they realize, as Ian said, it could be within reach with some work, but it does seem inspiring and galvanizing to people who did not know this was something feasible in this country.
Alex and Ian, thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
That was Alex Megarow and Ian Bell talking about their film WTO 99, which screened at IU Cinema in December 2025. Find links to more information on our website, ipm.org. I'm Kate Young. More nice work just ahead.
Welcome back to Nice Work. I'm Alex Chambers. It's the time of year when we ask questions about love. I mean, some of us ask those questions year-round, but it is more concentrated right now. Luckily, back in 2023, associate producer Mary Forrest, who went by Avi back then, got some answers. And I'm happy that I can share those with you now.
JP Houston.
JP Houston, do you go to IU?
I do not go to IU.
What are you doing out here?
I'm promoting a pickleball tournament.
Cool, and there's a big trophy there. Is love real?
Yeah, I think love is real.
Do you love pickleball?
Yeah, I like pickleball. I like pickleball. I don't love pickleball.
This is recording. What's your name?
Blake Wasco. I'm a sophomore. Yes.
Why?
And I think it's in multiple different forms. A sense of like, oh God, that was a big question to ask at this time. There's like platonic, romantic, sexual, there's all kinds of different forms of it, but it comes down to the essence of just, I think, caring. I see it as in multiple forms because like she's my best friend. I love her, but like obviously.
What's your name?
Grace.
But yeah,
So you love Grace?
Yes, I love Grace. I love everything.
I'm Line Våben. I'm a narrative journalist and an editor at the existential desk at Politiken, a newspaper in Copenhagen. Love is an emotion, and I'd say that to me it's very real when I'm with people, and especially if I'm with my closest people, my relatives and my children, my partner. Yeah, I would say that love is very real when I'm in the room with love. I would say that the notion of love is at a distance much more of a fantasy or an imagination, and it's much more the concept of love that you have yourself and that you project to others. So I would say love is much more real when you're actually in the room with people than when you're not.
What's your name?
Kurt Waldman. Yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm in the geography department. I guess you know it if you experience it.
Have you experienced it?
Yeah.
When?
With my wife.
Do you both love geography?
No. She doesn't love geography at all, I don't think. Yeah, it's easier to find people different from you, more interesting. If somebody's the same as you, it's kind of boring.
How is she different from you? Bean? Hi. Yeah, dude. I can't believe I'm asking this, but is love real?
She loves everybody. Sorry, she's playing.
I'm Rex.
I'm Scott.
Blackwell.
Meadows. Landscape.
Landscape. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. I mean, well, you either love them or you don't. Probably my other half. I've been with her for 22 years, so something says something there. So
It'd be love. I've been married 40 years, buddy. Yeah, my kids.
Hi. Sorry to interrupt. Am I interrupting you? What's your name?
Darren Collins. I'm a freshman this year. I feel like lots of times people equate love only to certain people, but love extends to a lot of different things. I feel like everyone truly loves something. I truly love drums. Music is what I do, so it's just love doesn't have to just be between a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, or whatever you want to identify as. It's it goes to things you're passionate about. Passion is a direct extension of love.
What's your full name?
Sasha Kuznetsov.
Is love real?
Yes.
Why?
Because I think I've felt it before. I think I've felt it right now. When I'm with my boyfriend, it just feels really happy and like warm inside. I would get anxious about how I'm gonna get somewhere, or like just like regular things people get anxious about and don't even realize. Like all of that just seems a lot more insignificant, and I don't stress as much about like the little things. I also don't stress as much about the big things, like finding a job after college and everything. Like it just seems like everything's going to like work out, even though nothing's really changed. It's just the feeling of like love. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that. Also, can I get a small black coffee, please?
Yes, of course.
Emma Elizabeth Ostland. I grew up here, so I'm just visiting home right now. I'm going to college at the University of Arizona. I think it's a byproduct of survival. I feel like surviving in the world, having your needs met, isn't enough to feel human. And I think that love is something that we've created and have become reliant on to feel human and feel connected with the world around us and the people around us. And it's become an important necessity of life, is having love.
So do you think love is good or bad?
I think it has good intentions, but it can be used cruelly depending on who wields the love. So my parents divorced when I was young, and when I had to choose which parent to live with, my dad would use his love in a way that was kind of emotionally manipulative. He didn't realize it at the time. He just loved me and wanted me to be with him. And so he'd bribe me with like, oh, I'll get you a dog, I'll buy you a car, just all this stuff to try to get me to live with him because of this love. He didn't see it as a negative thing, but definitely I think that love can turn negative because of the desperation that often comes with it, and like how much we love and what that can turn into when we can't get that love back.
So it's more
sense.
Excuse me. Yeah.
What's your name?
Avi.
Okay, my name's Brian. Nice to meet you. Brian Harris. Well, I'm older, but I'm going to school to be an electrician.
Have you told anyone you love them?
Yes, I have.
Who?
My mother. I love her because she supported me throughout everything that I've ever done. She even, loved and supported me when I wasn't the Brian that you understand in this stature now. The Brian before, very talented skater, just sensitive and quick to react without thinking things through. The honest answer is she helped me through that by kicking me that. Sorry, I can't cuss. By kicking me out. She kicking me out really had me, up against the fence and let me really come to terms with the things that I needed to do and the things that I didn't need to do in order to survive. And it was that kind of love right there that I hated in the beginning. She didn't let me grab my stuff, nothing. Just kicked me out cold turkey. I had to start 100% from scratch. But I ended up winning $2,000 about 2 weeks later. And that money right there ended up me getting my first apartment on my own. I won the money on the scratch-off ticket.
Oh, yeah, fantastic.
My name's John.
Full name?
Shu.
And Joy, Shu.
I'm retired.
I'm retired also, with family and friends and everything. I've seen it firsthand. Mm-hmm. And our motto of our family is love loudly.
Be loud about your love.
Yes, and that came from our
Very
granddaughter.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very literal. She was very loud. Caitlin, she passed away on Valentine's Day 7 years ago.
8 years
8
ago.
years already.
It'll be 8 years this Valentine's Day.
And that was the theme of her eulogy at her service. And the pastor said, you knew when Caitlin was around because she loved loudly. Mm-hmm. So that we all say loudly, love loudly. You have to.
She was a very outgoing little girl. She died at age of 5. So, she didn't have a very long life. But when she was around, you knew it.
She had an illness, and they couldn't determine that from autopsy. So we
don't know why God took her, but he did. He had a reason.
Right.
She would go into church, and everybody in church knew she was there. because she'd go, hi, you, hi. She
Very
was
loud voice.
Very loud voice. And a very loving child. She loved everybody. Everybody that knew her loved her. She loved everybody. She was very loud and proud about it. And we want to keep that memory of her alive.
That was produced by Mary Forrest in 2023. Mary now lives in New York City. I'm Alex Chambers. We've got more nice work coming up.
This is Nice Work. I'm Tyler Lake, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Alex Chambers and Kate Young. And I'm really excited that you guys wanted to talk about camp. And I think really to get started, we have to start with Susan Sontag's seminal work, Notes on Camp, where she really drills down on the idea of like failed seriousness, exaggeration, and artificiality.
Tyler, not that kind of camp.
Oh.
More like summer camp.
Oh.
You know, like for kids. Now's the time to be thinking about that. They do fill up quick.
But to be fair to Tyler, you might be able to learn about that kind of camp at Constellation Summer Camp. They have a lot of camps actually going on this summer. There's a movie camp for teens, a production of The Odyssey for kids grades 4 to 7, Broadway theater camp doing a production of The Lorax for grades 1 to 3, everything in between. And those will be happening in phases across the summer.
Oh, geez, guys. So I didn't prepare for this. Let me see if I can find something. Well, Kate, you give us your next recommendation.
Yeah, if theater isn't what your kids are into, how about making some mandalas or quilling, which is rolling and shaping paper to create images, or my favorite, Comics 101. Those are all available at the Swope Art Museum in Terre Haute.
Ooh, Kate, are you going to finally learn how to draw comics?
Maybe.
I'm kidding. So if you're into music, or your kids are into music, Girls Rock Bloomington will be hosting a camp from July 20th through the 25th, and that is a blast.
Also, Boys and Girls Club Camp Rock has programming all summer long. They have a pottery field trip, musical talent shows, and lots of fun outdoor stuff like trips to the zoo and state parks.
Love a talent show. So Tyler, have you managed to find anything?
Yeah, I think I did. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but the Monroe County Public Library apparently has a summer reading program that seems really popular.
Yeah, I don't think you're the first person to discover that one.
It is an amazing program, though, a favorite among many kids that I know.
Kids I know, too.
And it looks like it's not the only library that does this. Bartholomew and Vigo counties also have summer reading programs, as does the Bedford Public Library.
Cool.
We love our libraries. And our Philharmonics. The Columbus Philharmonic has a couple of camps on offer this summer. Strings Camp for grades 1 through 9, and that's a week-long event. And they also do SOAR Music Camp. That's a day camp, and it's focused on choral music. And here in Bloomington, there's Bridges, a strings camp that my kid participated in for many years.
That all sounds fun, but possibly even more fun, for some kids at least, is the IU Game Development Camp, which is a bit pricey for a 5-day camp, but you do get to make video games, so worth it, maybe?
It would have been well worth my parents' money back in the 90s, if that had existed.
Sorry, Tyler.
My kid did participate in that one, too, and also loved the Wild Nature Project. They'll be announcing their schedule soon, but that's a lot of camp. I want to hear about this performance you saw, Alex.
I'm on it. I wrote something, and it's coming up. 100 years ago, death was closer than it is now. Penicillin was 2 years away. The Civil War was within living memory. The Great War had just ended. So you can't blame that generation for imagining that the Ouija board, which had just been a fun parlor game until then, might actually let you commune with all the loved ones you had lost. That's the world of the new show from Constellation Stage and Screen. It opened at the Waldron in downtown Bloomington on January 30th. As you walk into the theater, jazz plays quietly and smoke drifts through the air. The set is impressive. It's a warehouse with broken down brick walls, wooden crates scattered around, a painter's ladder, a wall plaster peeling with smaller portraits surrounding one large one. I thought at first the large one was James Joyce. It wasn't, but if you want to picture the picture, picture Joyce. An old, faded sign that says William Penn and Sons hangs over the center of the set. There's a table with a Ouija board on it. An exposed I-beam crosses over the audience. Even the overhead lights for the seating are period-specific. Though, with the seating on risers and no center aisle, getting to the middle seats was a bit tricky. The show starts with the lights going out. When they come back up, a man has appeared with a dead body in front of him. The living man is middle-aged in a black suit with a thin tie, black hair, and black brow-line glasses. The dead man is under a sheet on a table. The man, our host and MC and narrator and magician, is played by Rob Zabrecky. Zabrecky is a writer, actor, and award-winning close-up magician from L.A. On stage, he tells us what's happened. Walter Penn, I know, the sign says William. William does get mentioned too, and I missed the detail that would have explained that connection. Walter Penn was the owner of a Ouija board factory, but he's recently fallen to his death from the roof. It's now our project to try to get in touch with the spirits and figure out what happened. As our host, spoiler, he's the only performer and he doesn't give us his name. As our host tells us the story, he walks around the stage, starting with a few simple paper cutting tricks, a set of paper dolls, a few cuts in a folded paper that unfolds to reveal a relevant word. The magic gets increasingly elaborate. He passes out black velvet bags to collect important objects from trusting audience members. Objects float mysteriously. An audience member and an assistant tie up our host's arms with ropes, then tie his ankles to a chair. Then, while he's behind a painter's tarp on a scaffold, seemingly impossible things happen. In between these illusions, our host continues to share the story, including background on the Ouija board and its context. He weaves together historical fact and narrative fiction, with the person who turned the Ouija board into a commercial product being Walter Penn's original boss, not the real businessman Elijah Bond. The historical fact lends the fictional narrative a satisfying veracity, though the story, a rags-to-riches trajectory for Walter Penn, where he ousts his former boss as owner of the company and marries his brother's fiancée, the story relies on tropes that might have felt fresher in the 1920s than the 2020s. Throughout the narration and magic tricks, music came in and out, underscoring the changes in mood and activity. Perfectly timed sound effects played in different places throughout the theater. The sound design was immersive, as was the lighting. After intermission, a large table has appeared on the stage. After a few more illusions, our host invites 8 audience members to sit around the table for the séance itself. I won't reveal what happened during the séance, but I will warn that it involved a couple of sudden loud noises and flashes of light. The special effects were the star at this point. It was spookily fun and showed real dedication to creating an immersive experience. The final moments of the show involve a reveal that, if you let it, could reshape the outlines of the mystery that has unfolded over the past 80 minutes. It can leave you surprised and intrigued. The moments immediately after the show, however, were confusing, as our host never took a bow and the audience sat for a few minutes and then finally decided to get up and leave. That mystery was less satisfying. Séance, The Board Awakens is a collaboration between performer Rob Zabrecky and director Chad Rabinowitz. In the director's note, Rabinowitz writes that the illusions aren't presented as tricks or feats. They're woven directly into the storytelling, emerging naturally from the world of the play. Seamlessly weaving a magic act into a paranormal narrative turns out to be a tricky feat all its own. At times, the scaffolding of the story buckled under the weight of tricks that felt forced and out of place. But everything held together during moments when the illusions were so complete, they felt truly magical. But while the ingredients didn't fully blend into a potion, the human desire for contact with the dead came through in the historical storytelling, and the illusions, when they managed to take off, were delightful. Constellation's Séance, The Board Awakens runs through Sunday, February 15th at the Waldron Arts Center in Bloomington. For Nice Work, I'm Alex Chambers. You've been listening to Nice Work, a production of WFIU, WTIU, and Indiana Public Media. Find us at ipm.org.
This episode was produced and edited by Alex Chambers. We get production help from Danny William, Holly Wilkerson, Carl Templeton, Leo Pies, Jillian Blackburn, and Jonah Ballard.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Alan Davis. Additional music from Universal Production Music. The executive producer is Eric Bolstridge. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Nice work, Alex.
Nice work, Tyler.